Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this IATA webinar, part of our special series on reshaping the passenger experience. We will be starting this webinar in a few minutes. Until then, please hold tight. Get yourself a glass of water, a cup of tea, something to make yourself comfortable, because you will not want to leave your screen once we have started. Once again, welcome. We will be starting in a couple of minutes. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are taking part in the IATA webinar, part of our special series on reshaping the passenger experience. We'll be beginning in a couple of minutes. Please use these few moments to make yourself as comfortable as you can be. It's going to be a great webinar today. You have a fantastic panel, and we're really looking forward to sharing our information and knowledge with you. We'll be starting in just 2 minutes' time. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I see we have about 30 attendees joined since we started broadcasting, so welcome if you've only just joined us. We are now ready to start our webinar, and I would like to start off by reminding you of a few basics. First of all, today's webinar is on disruption management. Are we talking service excellence, or are we firefighting? The world of disruption management has changed, and you're going to learn all about that over the next hour. This is an IATA webinar, therefore it is being conducted in alignment with our competition law guidelines. This means that you cannot discuss collective agreements, prices, charges, markets, intended strategies, only publicly available information. You certainly can't talk about individual costs, rates, charges, intentions, or any sensitive information. You will notice during the webinar that you have a Q&A panel. You can enter questions into that, And in the event that we have time, we will answer those. In the event that we do not have time, we will answer them as part of an FAQ, a frequently asked questions, available after the webinar. Please note, any question that you submit, we have to have reviewed by our legal team who are online with us. They will flag questions that we can actually ask. And without their permission, we can't ask the question. So if your question doesn't get asked, perhaps you'd like to think of a different way to ask it. Our agenda today is to look through the purpose of a panel discussion at disruption management. We're going to find out where we are today through a reality check. We're going to look at what our panel has learned over the last few months, and indeed based upon their many years of experience in the industry. We're going to hear what they think about the future of disruption management and how things are going to change as a result of the pandemic that the world is currently going through. And then we're going to wrap up with a few key messages. It is going to be a very fun-filled afternoon, or morning, or evening, depending upon where you are. Today's panel consists of our moderator and co-pilot, Steve Tarbuck. Steve is from Global Travel Matters, and he'll be asking the panel lots of questions. We also have Christiane van der Koepel from KLM, who is our airline representative. To represent the ground handlers, we have Irene Papusti. Irene works for Gold Air Handling and has worked with me considerably on the IATA ground operations manuals. Our technology solution provider from 15 Below is Al Tredinnick. Al is a well-known speaker, well-known tech provider. I'm sure you've all heard of 15 Below. I'm sure you'll learn a little bit more about them today. And finally, from IATA, we have Hasse Joergensen. Hasse is the manager in charge of all of our disruption management activities in the passenger team. So without any further delay, I would now like to hand over to Steve Tarbuck, the owner and founder of Global Travel Matters. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. And may I just also offer my greetings to everybody, whether it's morning, whether it's the afternoon, or it's early evening. I'd like to thank you very much for allocating some time to share this experience with us this afternoon, looking at disruption management. Before we get into the further discussions surrounding this topic, may I just offer you a little bit of introduction to myself for those of you who may not be familiar with myself. I have over 20 years experience in the aviation industry, and my speciality is ground operations and airport services, and indeed have witnessed a considerable number of disruptions in that period of time I've been employed in the industry. My experience has spanned all the various stakeholders of the industry, such as working for a ground handler. I've also worked for a number of airlines, both LCC and indeed legacy carriers, and indeed have worked for an international airport for a period of time. As a person, I'm very keen on efficiency and getting things done in a very sort of economical and a viable way. And so for that, I like to spend as much of my time as possible looking at lean and trying to re-engineer processes to achieve that goal. I'm an enthusiastic innovator. I often dream and try to find solutions and try to work through a way of doing things better. I always constantly challenge myself to try to solve problems and take learnings from my past experience. I'm a proactive person. I rather think about tomorrow than worry about what happened yesterday, but of course I still will use that time to understand lessons learned. And during my time in the industry, I've been very lucky to experience working for many different major organizations. And over the last few years, I've been working for myself and trying to use the skills I've learned in the industry to support others. And finally, for the last 6 months, I have become an instructor for IATA, and I specialise in designing and providing courses in service design, using people's emotions and understandings of problems to try to construct solutions that we can use within the industry. I will be your co-pilot for today, and as Andrew has rightly said, I will endeavour to ask as many questions as possible from not only yourself as the audience, but indeed the questions that I have constructed myself to provoke that debate amongst our panellists. However, I think we really want to hear more from our panellists now. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Christian from KLM and allow him to give his small introduction to himself. Christian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. What a powerful introduction, and it's an honor to be here and an honor to introduce myself after the co-pilot of today. So my name is Chris. Indeed, I work for the KLM. I'm a customer journey manager for disruption management within the customer experience department. I'm responsible for the disruption strategy, which goes from product design, including research, towards development, and up and including the execution, obviously. And we do this throughout the whole, let's say, chain and throughout the whole customer journey. That means I work a lot with different stakeholders, which I personally enjoy a lot. Next to that, I've been working within KLM in the digital department for a few years. And I'm super eager to share my disruption knowledge with you today. And I would like to hand over to Irene for her introduction.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. At first, I would like to thank Hasse Joergensen for the invitation. I hope today's webinars to find everyone very useful. My name is Irene Papoutsi and work for Goldar Handling as the Head of Quality, Environment, Corporate Reporting Data. I have been in aviation industry for 19 years and I had the opportunity to work for both airlines and ground handling companies. I joined Goldar Handling in 2012. Goldar Handling is a green ground handling service provider offering a full range of ground handling services in 35 airports in Greece, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Croatia, and Serbia, and also provides PRM services at Zurich Airport through Goldar AES System Consortium. So we have seen disruption in different places under different situations. And now I would like to hand over to Al.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Al Tredinnick. I'm head of commercial at 15 Below. Thanks for having me on the panel. And I congratulate anyone who knows whether it's morning, evening, Monday or Friday at the moment with these days of lockdown. So for those of you who don't know 15 Below, we are a company that works with about 47 airlines to help automate their communications with their customers. So we sit right in the middle of all of the disruption that's been happening and the passengers. I've been working with emerging technologies and in the technology space for about 20 years. About 6 years ago, I joined 15 Below because I really liked their approach to trying to automate passenger experience. So to take all the different technologies that we need to integrate with, like reservation systems and loyalty programs and ops systems and things like that, to make sure that when something goes wrong or there is a disruption, that the customer gets dealt with in a way that actually grows that that loyalty and that bond. I think the aviation industry has the same problem that a lot of industries have, which is how to adopt technologies. There are a lot of great technologies out there, but trying to make that work in a way that really suits passenger experience, things like that's been a great experience. Although I'm representing the technology here, I actually think that what the focus is for all of us here is trying to get the sort of empathy built into all of these processes. It doesn't take a big AI exercise to work out what passengers want when things go wrong in disruption. It's a case of trying to make sure that all the technology and everything kind of gets out of their way in some respects, so we all know how to deal with passengers, and they all know the sort of service they want to receive. So it's about trying to make that sort of technology work in that respect. Over to you, Hasse.
Thank you very much, Al, and thank you, Chris, Steve, and Irene as well to take part in the panel. I'm Hasse Joergensen. I'm Senior Manager for Passenger Experience in IATA. I have 20 years experience in aviation. Actually, I have 25 when I think about it, but it makes me younger just to say that I have 20 years plus. I joined IATA in 2016 after 21 years working for Copenhagen Airports. I am, as Andrew said, I'm responsible for disruption management in providing guidance and standards, developing tools and so on. And we will be delivering a disruption management manual this year, so I'm looking forward to that. And I have a degree in airport master planning, a specialty in customer experience, and with a major in developing self-service and automation options at airports. I also have a special sort of area that I'm occupied with. It's airline business models, which I find really interesting to help airlines and airports to run their business. I also act as an instructor for IATA and have training courses in the passenger process design. So yeah, with that being said, I think we're going to have a really interesting morning, afternoon, evening. So with no further ado, please, next slide, please, Andrew. So in air travel, disruptions are defined as delays, cancellations, diversions, or any other situation where the passenger doesn't receive the service paid for. Needless to say, disruptions pose a considerable cost to airlines and a major inconvenience to passengers. Regardless of the source of the disruption, every delay minute, every mishandled bag, every lost connection is a cost issue for the airline in play, and sometimes even for the customer, but certainly for the industry as a whole. It comes to billions every year in lost revenue, reaccommodation expenses, and compensations. I think, more importantly, on top of all of this, we have a potential loss of customer loyalty. And you can say fair or unfair, but if a situation is not handled well, the customer may never return. On the other hand, well-managed response to accommodate the affected passenger could create real customer value and increase loyalty. What is causing the disruption becomes less important, as the customer is likely to accept the reality of, let's say, severe thunderstorm. So it really comes down to how an airline or an airport will be taking care of the problem at hand. That's where we can make a difference, and it becomes an opportunity. Next slide, please. So when a flight is disrupted, cancelled, delayed, rescheduled, or diverted en route, a fast and efficient response to accommodate the affected passenger is paramount. How this is done by the airlines or service providers, and to what extent the passengers have the tools to help themselves, is dependent on several variables. Obviously, the nature of the disruption and the airlines and airports' capability to offer options in the air, on ground, or internet or mobile, and so on. There are effectively three key areas where the aviation industry should or could continuously explore opportunities to deliver products and services to efficiently manage and quickly recover from disruptions. Firstly, and I think most importantly, proactive, timely, and accurate communication. It's absolutely paramount to the customer. Needless to say, how important it is to secure customer contact information, and to the extent necessary, share that information with relevant actors on the entire journey. Collecting customer contact information should be step number one on each and every journey. Secondly, a good range of self-service options whereby the customer can manage their own journey and be in control, even when there are unplanned schedule changes. Self-service is a commodity these days. It's not extravagant. Thirdly, in the light of where the world is going with tailored services and what's actually possible with today's and tomorrow's technology, some level of personalization and context awareness would be appropriate and certainly well received by the customers. Indeed, as an airport or an airline, you can communicate messages on public screens or over the PA system, but without doubt, a personalized message, a personalized service, or a solution communicated to the individual is likely to create a better customer experience. Next slide, please. Now, with that being said, something has changed. The COVID-19 has added a layer of complexity. Whereas disruptions in the pre-COVID times, by large, was characterized by single incidents on local level, impacting a group of travelers, the pandemic has caused massive disruptions across the globe, affecting all travelers, airports, and airlines in all regions. We've never seen anything like this before. We see border closures, entry restrictions, quarantine rules, and health measures affecting the customer experience on the entire journey. That is, if there are flights available. And if something happens underway, there are no or very few alternatives to reaccommodate the customer. The world is reopening in some regions and closing down in others. Regulation and measures are changed by the hour for, and let me say, for whatever good reason. New COVID cases, microbursts, can close down communities, cities, and even countries that have just reopened, making the travel experience very hard to predict and plan. I would say the confidence in air travel, or in travel as such, is almost gone. Next slide, please. So, looking at how people gradually embrace the reopening of a city in the sense of going out, shopping, dining, using public transportation, meeting and interacting with others in public places, and so on. This could be an indication that the fear of contracting COVID-19 is not the entire story behind concerns related to travel. For obvious reasons, we tend to focus on concerns related to catching the virus. But in fact, as shown here in the trend analysis from the recent IATA COVID-19 passenger insights report, it's not the risk of contracting COVID-19 that is the only concern. It's equally shared with the concern of being quarantined when traveling or being quarantined upon return from travel. So in other words, the disruption that something unexpected will happen when traveling is a major concern and partly explaining where the loss of confidence is coming from. Next slide, please. So looking at this happy couple, the big question really is, how can we bring confidence back in travel? Next slide, please. We are not claiming that disruption management will fix everything, but we do believe that proper disruption management, a good plan, is a key component in bringing back the confidence in travel. To bring back confidence in travel, the customer must be ensured that we, the aviation industry stakeholders, that is airlines, ground handlers, airports, and even governments, are capable of delivering quality service even under the unpredictable circumstance of a pandemic. This is our responsibility. Despite the nature of things, disruption management is not all about firefighting. It's a matter of service excellence. So with that, I think I'm going to leave the word with you, Steve. We're going to have a round table. Next slide, please.
Gosh, well, Hasse, thank you very much. A very, very interesting perspective, and indeed supported by evidence. So I think it's a great introduction that you presented, and a great way to set the scene of what we're actually facing as an industry, which is very well quantified there. Just for the sake of introductions for the rest of the audience to know what we are intended to do over the next couple of minutes is in our round table session. We are going to present just a few perspectives from our panelists on their experiences from not only from their perspective as industry professionals, but also as travellers as well. We're all travellers in this group, so we can share our experiences in that particular way. Now, from my perspective, you know, just to echo a few comments that from Hasse there, I think, you know, there's never really been a greater need now to ensure that our customers are cared for during routine and irregular operations. As we know, the most common reasons for delays and cancellations, generally centre around weather or mechanical or other technical problems. Occasionally crew logistics seep into some of the problems, and indeed dare I say that famous other operational reasons that we hear on Tannoy's quite a lot through our airports today. But of course, health has now positioned itself as one of the key reasons, potential reasons behind disruption. It could be localized or dare I say even widespread as we're experiencing today. And of course, this now will throw up additional considerations of its own. And as Hasse just mentioned as well, we're already seeing, widespread outbreaks and indeed spikes in certain areas of this pandemic showing its ugly face again. So the risk of disruption from health issues is really on the up, and dare I say, very much on the table of every boardroom for every company that not only is involved in the industry, but dare I say, uses the industry to conduct its business. I don't think we really need to remind ourselves, of the financial, we'll say, health of the industry that it finds itself in today. We're very weak financially speaking. Airlines and airports, want to see lower costs, and of course they want to also see lower costs as a result of disruption, and dare I say they want to see less damage to the customer satisfaction and at the same time retain that loyalty. Thus, experiencing further disruption today, and if we're not prepared, we will continue to increase our costs and dare I say slow down the recovery of debt that we are experiencing today. Passengers, as we know, travel for a reason, possibly business or indeed personal. And it's these needs for a person to travel we mustn't underestimate. Arguably, the goal of disruption management should be to help passengers get back on with their lives quickly. We want to help them to get back to where they want to be or to reach their destination. We want them to feel to be a valued customer of us and not merely just a P&R that needs to be ticked off on a list that's being dealt with by the organisation that's managing that disruption management. And in my opinion, this can only be achieved through uniting stakeholders that are responsible for airlines logistics, airport operations, infrastructure development, passenger care and communication of information to the public and indeed the press, hotels and other areas of hospitality. So dare I suggest that a greater visibility of events and an increased ability to make sure that the resources are available when most needed. And this could be supported by IT systems that can account for what has already happened and dare I say indicate possible solutions. I'd also believe we need to empower more managers who are in the best position to construct a coordinated response across their respective organisations. And thus, we should get closer to service excellence to maintain it as the norm and not just merely firefighting problems as and when they crop up on our desk. So from that point, may I just hand over to Chris, who can now provide us with his opinion from an airline perspective. Chris.
Thanks, Steve. I think Hasse, when you finished your speaking, I think it was really good that you stressed out those three customer needs, and especially the first one I think is sometimes a bit overrated, and that's trying to communicate the right information to the passengers. But that all starts with having the right contact details of our passengers. In our industry, that I found out personally that it's quite difficult to get those contact details safeguarded through all your organization on the right tooling, but also throughout all your different touch points. So personally, for us, it took quite a while to have that contact details on par, let's say. And together with partners and with IATA, we are still striving to improve that contact rate, because that is just the first step of being able to reach out to passengers. And then if you are able to reach them, then I think it's key to have that feed forwarding information and being contextualized, and from there on, indeed what you said as well, Hasse, be able to be personal and personalize that message. But I think it's a strong combination of that three. So being able to reach it, then contextualize the situation, understand, show that empathy, because digitally showing empathy is a bit more difficult than physically with our colleagues on the floor. And then the first step is actually personalize, and from there on, bring passengers to those self-service possibilities. And especially those self-service possibilities, I think, have been rapidly developing in the industry, which is, I think, is a very good thing for our own staff on the airports, but for sure also for our passengers. It's a much better experience when you can help yourself, when you have achieved your goal, let's say, by helping yourself. And we always have our great colleagues on the ground who can actually have extra attention or extra help and show empathy if it's needed. Yeah, so from there on, the self-service perspective is really key, and I'm sure we will come back to that later this afternoon. But looking back to also what Steve said on COVID, let's say the new disruption environment based on COVID, and I think one of my key learnings is previously disruption management was really focused on, let's say, day of operations, or at least in the operational window. And with the first phase of COVID, for sure it was still in the operational window because information came in today, had to be executed tonight, and was actually there tomorrow. But over time, we have been more focusing towards, let's say, cancellations more far in advance. I think that is a really big game changer for all of us, because in the future that happened less, and it was less impactful. And now with the high volumes of cancellations we're doing far in advance, our care centers cannot handle the airports. People go to the airports to seek for help. And I think that is really different compared to a few months ago. But I'm sure that Irene can share some thoughts on the airport from that perspective.
Well, from the ground handling perspective, let's say that our daily life had to do with safety and security, while at the same time we had to assure customers best experience. With the disruption of COVID-19, we had to shift from the primary goal and focus on health and safety first of passengers and employees more than ever before. Today, while being on the starting phase of operation, the ground handling providers as a major stakeholder supports the new target, which is to boost travelers' confidence. What we try to do is to proper implementation of all health protocols, the streamline of passengers flow and contactless services in order to minimize queue and crowds, and providing by all means to passengers accurate information protection. From my point of view, the success of the guard disruption management will be when passengers overcome their concerns and return to travel. Al, would you like to add something on that?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all of those points. I actually think we're in a kind of constant state of disruption now, and that we will be for quite some time. It's no longer it's not a percentage of bookings will get rebooked or rescheduled. Now every booking has a potential to be rebooked and rescheduled. So our approach to disruption needs to be proactive and pre-planned, and need to be able to handle those volumes. We have so across our about 47 airlines, something like that, we normally send out about 1.8 million messages a day. In the first 4 days of COVID really hitting in March, we sent out 18.5 million messages. And they're all customers that are getting told that their flight has been cancelled or moved or rebooked. So we really saw a difference between airlines and travel companies who had pre-planned that approach and automated it, compared to those that had any sort of manual intervention in those steps. Because if any of your processes involve a customer going to your website to fill in a form, or going to a call center, or queuing up at a desk, you know, if you're talking about 18.5 million people in the space of a few days, doesn't matter how spread out that is, it's going to take too long. So automation's become a real key. Hasse, you made the point about contextualization with that, though, and that is super critical. Just because you cancel a flight and you move everyone on that flight onto another flight, that doesn't mean that every passenger on that flight had the same experience. Some are traveling with children, some are on business, some are going for the day, some are going for 2 weeks. You know, you have to take into account that context with it, which sounds like a very difficult job to do, but actually, as I said earlier, I don't think it is. The beautiful thing about the aviation industry, and it's something that we don't talk about enough, is how good the data is. Contact details aside, which obviously is a massive issue, you can't contact people, you can't tell them. There is a lot of great information in a PNR that can allow you to personalize and contextualize what's going on. We know what type of booking it is, we know what type of customer they are, and we know if they're traveling with children, we know how long they're going for, how long it is until they fly, which is a really critical point from now on. How you deal with somebody making a booking for next March compared to how somebody making a booking for next week is going to make a big difference, particularly as that person flying next March is going to get rescheduled how many times between now and next March. It's going to take a while. So all of that needs to be taken into account. But like I say, the good news is the data is there. And actually the empathy is obviously there as well. We all know from working in the industry that how much effort everyone puts into providing great passenger experience. Everyone knows what they would do if it was just a one-to-one relationship with the customer. And it's just applying that using all that great data. The only other point I'd like to raise on this is that because we are in a constant state of disruption, I think everyone has accepted the disruption, but they will definitely judge on how we handle that and how proactive we are. It used to be that we used to check to see if someone had the right documents at passport control or check-in at the airport, and that can't continue. We need to make sure that we do these things well in advance. If your customer needs to fill in a form for a health declaration, which means they may or may not fly, definitely need to do that well before they get anywhere near an airport. Partly because they're not going to want to crowd around a desk filling in a piece of paper with a bunch of people, and partly because if they get rejected to fly, they don't want to be in the queue in front of a bunch of other people, social distancing. And as we know, that's changing all the time. But all of that can be done. It's just about, like I said, of always looking for those proactive and above all automated ways you can do it, because the volumes just exclude doing it on a one-to-one basis these days, unfortunately. Doesn't mean you can lose the personalization, though. It's still entirely possible to do that. The customers want to know, I think we always used to look at self-service as being a nice thing to do to give people choice. But I think actually, I want to know whether I have got a choice, and if I haven't, I need to be told. It is about that preparation. I don't really want to choose between lots of different options these days, because the parameters of where I can go, whether I need to be quarantined, if I need to be tested, all of those things. A lot of these things are just too many decisions to make. So I actually think it will change the way we do it. We need to tell people where they're going to have choice and what they need to prepare in advance, not say, okay, this has been rebooked. You can rebook yourself if you like. You need to help them with what the best options are, because there's too many variables to make those decisions these days. So I think it'll slow down recovery.
Great. Well, look, Al, Chris, and Irini, thank you very much for your comments and valued insights. I really want to move on, and I want to engage the rest of the audience. So, Andrew, can I ask you to put up the first poll, and then I will just explain to the guys what we're talking about here. So, basically, what you've heard, and we've heard quite a lot of good information so far. I just want you to reflect on what you heard so far, and in doing so, I'd just like you to get involved in a audience participation activity, one of the first of 3 polls that we've organised. And you'll notice on your screens that you now have the opportunity to make a selection. What we're interested in is your ability to influence disruption management within your organisation or indeed your community. And hence, regardless whether you're representing an airline, airport or supplier, or indeed otherwise, we would ask you, concerning your current disruption management solution, are you the designer or sponsor, the user, or dare I say, both the designer, sponsor, user, or none of the above? And if I could ask you to select your polls as quickly as possible, and then Andrew will give me an update of how the numbers are going, so that then we can then just reflect on the answers, and B, continue with the webinar.
Thank you, Steve. Just to let you know, currently you have about 35% of the audience has voted. As a reminder for the audience, all you need to do is click on your answer on the screen and then press submit. And I think we're at 45%. I think we should give them another 10 seconds.
Certainly, I'm happy to give another 10 seconds.
Okay, so 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, come on, let's get it to 60%, folks. 1, I'm going to close the poll just about now. We're at 60%.
Great, thank you. That was your test to see how you can use the poll. We have 2 more, so don't worry if you missed out on that poll. So as we can see, it's a mixed set of results here. Quite a lot of people actually not involved as using a disruption management system, and dare I say, involved in any of the activities and surrounding designing it. So that's an interesting poll to see, and we'll obviously feedback these information in the final post-event information. Andrew, if you could just move on to the next slide, and then we can then basically what we're going into now. We're going into sort of a 4-phase panel discussion with all my panelists. So if everyone could just make sure their cameras are on, so our smiling faces can be seen by our audience. So yeah, we're doing it in 4 phases, and what we have done is looked at various areas, and in this particular area where I wanted to start off was talk about disruption check and the reality of it. Of course, I'd just like to also remind you, ladies and gentlemen, on your GoToWebinar, you are able to pose questions, and as Andrew mentioned earlier on in the introduction, please pose your questions. We will read those questions and endeavour to answer as many appropriate questions as possible. Of course, failing that, if time beats us, then naturally we will answer those questions in the follow-up material. So don't worry, your efforts will not be lost. So let's start by asking our panelists to share their key observations through this challenging time. Sort of any surprises? So maybe if I just go straight to you, Al, yeah? Any surprises that you've come straight from understanding about what's happened in the reality check of disruption today? Al, you may need to unmute your mic.
I do apologise. I'll get used to it. 4 months into lockdown. Actually, the nature of disruption is pretty similar. It's the scale of it that's changed. I don't think there's the a lot that's actually significantly different from a disruption point of view, just so much that it is actually happening to everybody now. One of the things that I think has changed definitely has been the sort of ready to fly type approach, and the fact that there's so many potential disruption points getting through the airport now. As I said, we're seeing the things that airlines are asking us to do are linking through to government advisory sites, getting people to fill in forms and that kind of thing. And at the moment, it's generally been done in a fairly blunt way, so it's just like linked to, Thematic with IATA or whichever service the customer uses. But what we want to get it to is a point where each notification sort of tells the customer specifically in a personalized way, because you are this national traveling from here to here, these are your requirements, and that kind of thing. I think the only other really sort of big change in all of that is the speed at which all that needs to be done, which is, it has definitely changed, the immediacy, and that's not really the technology side, it's more the procurement and decision-making speed that is needed to really change,
Okay, Irini, can I just come to you then? So, from your opinion, how has the nature of disruption changed?
It has changed. The nature of disruption has changed as it's related to medical, economic, and sociological consequences. The disruption management in 2020 actually is a pandemic management. It requires different mentality and way of thinking. Fully acknowledging the current situation is difficult and risky, yet requires priority actions. Pre-COVID, the disruption was usually localized to a region. Today, we face challenges at the same time in multiple countries and continents. So fully agree with you. We could say the scale of exposure, demands expertise and competence is the ability to redesign the processes in real time today.
Okay, now Chris, obviously I'm where you're working for KLM. So, during this new disruption management for 2020, so what initiatives are you and indeed your colleagues now considering now you've experienced the first phase of disruption?
I think the always keep coming back the discussion about the tech versus human approach, and I think we were focusing a lot on technological improvements. Well, maybe this situation needed some more human influence, especially in the start. So I think that thin line is always good to keep in mind. On the other hand, we have been working on a lot of tech solutions, let's say, which are always helping us out in disruption cases. But as I said before, now the focus is much more on, let's say, I'm canceling a flight in 3 months' time as of now. I'm not sure how my network will look like at that time. How do I rebook? When do I rebook? Do I give them a call? Do I just send them an email and wait to come back to me? And then I have long waiting lines. So I think the solutions we are working on digitally as a self-serve point of view will not so much change. But if you look to products in the airport, you definitely need to think of other solutions than before, because the self-service solution on the airport will definitely be super important, and maybe even more in the current case. But if you look to social distancing on the airport, which is obviously maybe doable today as the volumes of passengers are okay-ish, but slightly scaling up the volumes, obviously at some point social distancing will become an issue. So looking to developments we are looking at is how can we, for example, queue people in a way, if they cannot help themselves on a touch point, how can we queue them in such a way that they don't need to be physically around, but they can go wherever they want, and we just text them when it's their turn, and we are able to help them. And these kind of solutions need to speed up, I think, today.
Sure. So you've got these people in the airport now. So I'm going to go back to you, Irini. Now we've got all these passengers in the airport, and we're dealing with real-time disruption management. What do you hope for moving forward in respect to this particular area?
First of all, I hope in future the disruption management to have to do again with extreme weather conditions and air traffic congestions, and to avoid having once again that sharp drop of flight demand and ground fleets. Otherwise, I don't believe that we will talk about aviation in real time. So I think somehow that has to change and to go back to a new normal that people will trust and be in the airports again.
Okay, and Al, I mean, you know, you're representing all the tech companies, you know. What are the customers asking these companies now to produce for them to possibly drive to more of a technology solution?
I think, I mean, it's like I say, it's still similar things they were asking before. It's just the use of it's changed. So, you know, like with pre-trip notifications, that was a lot about driving ancillary strategies, and now it's more about avoiding, you know, the wrong people turning up at an airport, that kind of thing. But do you think one of the, like I said, one of the really big things that's changed is the speed of decision and implementation. Everyone's having to do things in a lot more agile way. We've been quite surprised. Some airlines have gone from it's really changed the way people make decisions. It's really changed what they're willing to offer. And we've had to kind of adapt to that. You'd think it'd be strange for a tech company to not be ready to sell things as fast as they used to, but actually it's become an issue because people have to get it sorted by next week. I'm getting calls from airlines saying I need to tell people about health declaration forms. We start flying in a week. Can we set this process up? It's you know, everyone's having to stay on their toes. It's good though.
Okay, right. Andrew, can we just go on to the next slide? I'm conscious of keeping this discussion moving through the various subject matters. So, you know, quite clearly, I hope in the 3 or 4 months that we've been experiencing this disruption, we have learned some lessons from this, and indeed, and sort of have a better consideration towards moving forward and being, dare I say, more effective in what we're doing. So Chris, you know, have you been able, you know, from some of your systems or indeed feedback from some of your staff working in this particular area, you know, have you understood the effectiveness of your disruption management program?
To be honest, I think it's very somewhat early to say that we have learned all our lessons already. But for example, hearing what Al said about a client asking for, can we have this in a week? I'm more seeing requests for this should be done tomorrow, and we have this in place tomorrow. And I think otherwise the flight cannot depart for health and regulation restrictions, etc. So I think the beginning, what we learned, and I was not there during different or early crises, but I think what was very strong to see is that a lot of different silos were actually broken throughout the industry. So people were super eager to find each other, to kind of firefighting the first few weeks, and to actually do this all together. And of course, sometimes you forget sometimes the operational colleague, so then stuff happens at gate. So the whole chain should work more together, and I think that's what we learned, because there's the power of connecting with each other. But on the other hand, information changing so rapidly, and I think on that point we're still learning every day how to cope with that. Because the immer changing restrictions are super hard to manage. But on the other hand, we're doing our utmost best to have it in place for customers and for our own people, because those restrictions are not only for passengers but also for crew, etc. So that comes down into working together, and on the good side, and sometimes on the still learning side.
So Chris, you mentioned you know, everyone was very quick to react, but would you say now that that your particular, or indeed what you're seeing from other airlines, are they able to sustain this disruption management, or have we come to reaching the edge and there's no more fuel in the tank on disruption management?
I think the crisis we go through now will definitely help to let's say higher the bar for our future disruption management. So that will definitely that might be a positive thing. But yeah, as I said, time will tell how it will significantly change throughout the future. But for now, I think it will help us. And on a note, it's really wonderful to see basically that more and more stakeholders see the relevance of disruption management, where in the past it might be obviously less important than one of your commercial strategy implementations, and now we see that we really need to have this properly in place. So that's also a good point.
Okay, great. Irene, just one quick question for you on this particular subject, and not just necessarily maybe from the organisation you represent, or indeed the people that you represent, but dare I say from the whole community of ground handlers. You know, what could you have done differently if this happens again?
Well, at first, I would like to say that a crisis like COVID requires the involvement, requires the involvement of all stakeholders in every community. We should join our forces and work as one team. We also realize the necessity and the benefits of digitalization. So I think what might have to change in future is to speed up a little bit the pace of digital transformation, especially for ground handling service. I believe that this is something that we need. Also, I believe that we also realized the true value of identifying the strengths and weaknesses in everyone's business.
Okay, thank you. Al, can I just, Andrew, can I just keep things moving forward and go to the next slide? Because I would like to get the next poll, because that actually encompasses what we've said in the reality check, and indeed what we're talking about now. In respect of lessons learned, and again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just ask you a question. I mean, Christian mentioned a bit about technology, talked about people. Irene's got people, and Al's, of course, driving technology. You know, from a main basis of an operation to drive a disruption management solution, whether it's your own or indeed you're using one, what would you believe is possibly the key behind it? Is it still human, or should it be technology driven, or indeed, dare I say, a combination of both? And if you could sort of say, poll your answers as soon as possible, then I can then keep the webinar continuing on with the next panel discussion.
So Steve, your vote is creeping up there. It's doing pretty well. Should we give another 10 seconds?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'm sure that people want to charge their glass with another cup of coffee shortly. So let's keep this going. Guys, if you could vote as soon as possible. Thank you.
So I'm going to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just let the last couple of people sneak in there, and I'm going to share the results right now.
Fantastic. A combination of both, and that is a very balanced answer, in my opinion. Obviously there's a small portion of talking about human and technology, but I think we haven't moved into the technology space totally yet, Al, and dare I say, really, you've still got a lot of work to do with the human activities as well. So I think that that's quite a fair indication of where we are, but of course, this comes at a cost as well. So thank you very much for polling in the second vote. We've got one more coming up, and if we can just move to the next slide, which we've got there now moving forward. We keep on using these words, firefighting and service excellence. And of course, that's very much the theme of the of this webinar. But recognizing, or dare I say, objecting that things need to change. Okay, what are the key objectives moving forward? And let me go straight to you, Al. Yeah, from a technology perspective, what is the #1 thing in your mind that you should be focusing as experiencing the current disruption?
I think actually it's ironically not technology. I think as a technology provider, the technology is kind of inherent. I think it is that empathy that's the important thing. People get too caught up in the specific technology. So whether it's got to be WhatsApp or AI or any of those things, and you know, ultimately it's all led by this sort of human empathy and the insight. You know, we're very experienced people in the industry, in whoever we deal with, and it's about trying to take that experience and apply it to the technology. The technology has the muscle and the speed to help. It's just about trying to make sure that we really do lean on the experience of the airlines. I know on this panel, like well, a lot of us dealt with the incident in Brussels a few years back, where we were facing similar challenges of making sure everyone was through security easily and they knew what to expect when they turned up, and making sure we kept an eye on social media to, you know, to map the fallout of all of these decisions. I think that's the same thing. Like I say, it's just a scale thing. But I think we've got the collective experience between us. It's just about trying to sort of map those processes so that technology carries the weight.
Okay, so continue on that theme of people, and I think there's something that we mentioned earlier on as a group. We've put a lot of effort into customer experience, and I think we shouldn't really be wasting that. So maybe Irene, looking at the ground handler side and thinking about maintaining that strong customer experience. What needs to be addressed soon to maintain that?
Three should be the key objectives, I will say, for the next period, for what we're facing in front of us. The first is to continue evolving our strategy, capabilities, and channel of communication with our stakeholders. Second, to identify what crisis-driven measures should be retained into the new normal. And third, the crisis choice to maximize day-to-day operation sustainability and flexibility during disruption. I believe that the biggest challenge that we have in front of us as ground handlers will be the cost management and the budget of reduction. The priority to compress spendings and monitor liquidity will cause repurposing of staff roles and rethinking our business model.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, just I'm conscious of the time, but I hope you can spare us a further 10 minutes if possible, just so we can finish off this webinar. There's just a couple more debates that we want to have, so I appreciate if our audience could just hang on that little bit longer, then we can obviously keep just overrun slightly. Okay, great. Let me just jump straight back into you, Chris, then. Yeah, so earlier you answered the question of what you guys are working on and what are some of your priorities, but what are those priorities? Can you just maybe just give a bit more detail on that, and indeed, how long is it going to take for you to achieve anything that you've put in, that you are actually currently trying to develop?
Yeah, so as I said before, the good thing is that within the organizations you probably have more, let's say, more focus on managing this disruption, or in some cases maybe only focusing on managing this disruption. And on the other hand, obviously we are very much cost-driven, all of us at this moment. So obviously the development capacity we have is much smaller. So for sure, things we had on the roadmap for this year will not happen, and we will only look to those things we really need to have, and then we probably are looking into self-service solutions for rebooking, self-service solutions if you look to recovery, vouchers, as I said before, the queuing in order to stimulate stimulate distancing as well. So these are the things we probably need to we're probably working on this year, and looking to next year we probably have to do a whole road mapping again, looking to budget, people who are available, etc.
Yeah, because I think that's a very interesting point about self-service. I mean, Hasse brought it up in his fine introduction about self-service supporting disruption management, but now we're in this health space. What about touching self-service devices? Has that had an influence on what you're thinking about for the future?
So which device did you say, sorry?
I'm actually touching a self-service device with your finger, touching a screen.
Ah, yeah.
And
focusing on own devices, is even more important than before. Well, obviously a kiosk on the airport is a very strong tool, but now it should be cleaned and should be sanitized all the time. So yeah, that has some new regulations, some new insights for our operational colleagues to manage it as well. Yeah, so obviously it goes into more own touch points, our website, applications, etc.
Okay, great. Andrew, can I just ask you to put up the last poll up for our audience to participate in, please? And just want to finalize with a quick poll, talking about disruption management and indeed your solution. I talked about sustainability a minute ago and I posed that question to Christian, and then I suppose I'm asking you, ladies and gentlemen, are you confident that your existing disruption management solution can cope with the next major disruption? And I'll leave it up to Andrew to help me with the numbers and the timing of this particular poll.
Thanks, Steve. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you got 60% of the audience voting on the first poll. You got 50% on the second poll. We're now into the third. You're well practiced on how these work. I'd like to see if we can beat that 60%. Right now, we're just coasting towards 40%. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds as usual. So we'll
Yeah,
leave
please,
the 10
Rebecca,
mark.
we want to get the IATA record for the participation in a poll.
Well, that would be quite impressive. That would be quite impressive. So 10, 5, 4, 3, 2. You're ever so close to breaking the 60. We've hit 60. 62. Well done, everybody. We've broken 60. So that's very good. I will now close the poll and show the results, Steve.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So, oh, that's an interesting response. That should I say, question mark about whether you are unsure whether your disruption management solution can cope. That's a very, very interesting response. But encouraging to see that nearly 29% of you are actually confident that you can manage the next level. The concern is that the 13% that doesn't have a disruption management solution, I hope that you're not airlines. So, but anyhow, thank you very much for your participation in the quick poll, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just move on to the final element of the debate within the panelists. And just basically moving forward, how do we get to where we want to be? And that doesn't mean jumping on an aeroplane. It means, you know, working together and what should we be doing to try to produce that solution that our customers, that we need to care for during their journey, whether it is regular or, dare I say, irregular operations. What do we need to do to care for them? And what do we need from, say, the industry to support us? Let's start off with you, Al. What is missing from the technology space in achieving this?
I think it's the same sort of thing that's probably not just in the technology space. I think it's probably industry wide, and that is it was what Christian mentioned earlier about breaking down the different silos. Some of those silos at the moment are probably between different tech providers. We're seeing a lot of we've had to do a lot of collaboration with other partners in order to get to a solution, and I think that's going to continue. So it's bringing together, like I said, you know, we've had to work with various partners on the doc check, health check, government requirements, and then inside the airline, that's across different silos as well, because, you know, doc check used to be an airport thing, and now it's not. It's an in advance type of process. So I think the technology is there. It's combining them and making sure we can all work together and do it really quickly as well is the key.
Okay, great. And Irene, what can the ground handlers do to support this this objective of moving forward and achieving excellence?
The role of ground handling is considered as an interface for communication between partners and authorities. Ground services' primary target is to ensure a safe, secure, and reliable operation and focus on quality service and customer expectation. So what we're going to do is to focus on that, and we'll contribute with flexibility, efficiency, and speed adaptation to the forthcoming changes.
Thank you. Chris, so finally, what's holding up the carriers from achieving a seamless handling of disruption every time?
I think Al really spoke correctly about the whole implementation of travel restrictions, having the right documents. This is besides the fact that the information foreseeing is changing a lot and is always super last minute. The next step is how actually do we have that in place in order to, for our own crew, but also especially for our passengers who have it in place. And I think that is super complex to have. And if we would have, let's say, a one single source of truth, that will be the perfect from an airline point of view, of course. And next to that, I think the complexity of our product has increased over the years. So if you look to a lot of partners who we are working together with, but also looking to ticket fares, ticket conditions, ancillaries, so the complexity of product got more and more, which also means that, let's say, in a pre-COVID disruption, it already is harder to manage that because you have all these variables, and that will not change in the current crisis, right? So it will probably add up, and that combination together makes it really challenging.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Hasse, I'm going to just ask you a question quickly. Who is best placed to guide the industry to a more collaborative and effective disruptive management program?
That's a very good question, Steve. Thank you for that. I don't think, there is one entity, to take on the responsibility of the shoulders of, delivering guidance or, I think it's all about collaboration. I do think, however, that, as IATA, for instance, as we provide guidance, standards, and so on, we would definitely take the responsibility to take the lead in certain questions and help to come up with solutions that will guide airlines, airports, industry stakeholders how to handle disruptions and how to deal with the whole COVID-19 thing. I think we take this very seriously and do whatever it takes to sort of have a word, make a stand on behalf of our customers, the airlines, and as well as passengers. We will continue providing guidance, and among other, as I mentioned before, we're going to deliver a disruption management manual. However, on top of that, I think what we've learned from the conversations we had in the panel today, it's also about all the small details, things that sort of is left for the airlines and left for the ground handlers and airports to do themselves. Is know your customer. If you want to make a difference, know your customer. But obviously, you should be able to take advantage of the guidance that is provided by IATA, as well as ACI, ICAO, and so on. I think the COVID-19 really showed that, as Chris said, that it brought people together, and also the different entities that usually put out guidance have really been successful in working together, and the speed of delivering guidance, I mean, it's just been upgraded, by this, the urgency within COVID-19. So yeah, I definitely think that taking the lead in this as IATA is definitely important.
Thank you, Hasse. It's reassuring to know that there is an industry body behind to support the aviation community in this particular area. So if I ask Andrew just to flick to the next slide, I just want to wrap up from the panelists. So just a few final words on disruption management, and from my perspective, firstly, I'd just like to say my thanks to my lovely panelists for all their insights, their preparation, and sharing some of their experience on this particular very important subject. From my perspective, as we restart this industry, there is an underlying need, in my opinion, to install a greater degree of confidence that today's new normal is safe, hygienic, and reliable. And it could be never more important than today to bring that confidence back to our travellers. If we get it wrong, you get it wrong at your own peril. And those that overlook the fact that passengers are individuals, as we have stressed on a number of occasions, and don't treat them as a passenger, but just treat them as an IROP statistic, may find their company recovery programs stalling, or dare I say the others are cruising to success. So, Chris, can I just ask you to share some of your final words, please?
Sure, I will keep it short in terms of time, because you can consider this as a disruption already. And so I would like to say that we should keep on focusing on the self-service solutions even more than we did before. But we need to take into account the solution for our operational colleagues as well. So we need to keep them in the whole design process aligned and actually include them in the solution. And I think next to that, if you have the staff with the right behavior and the service-driven behavior in the airport, combine that with tech, I think you can do a great job already.
Thank you. Irene.
Well, I believe that the sector that we are, aviation, is a critical industry and one that drives economy actively. But more important as us as individuals, as persons, company must be ready to address failures that we're going to face in the near future, and maybe that lead to performance issues. We need to be focused on long-term goals and to improve ourselves despite the tough times. My final word is that aviation will recover, but it will take time.
Thank you. And Al?
Yeah, I think my final thought on this is that certainty is kind of gone in the industry. So we need to be planning with taking into account all those variables, you know, as much as possible. No one's buying a flight anymore. They're betting on a flight. No one's really setting a schedule. They're kind of betting on that schedule. So it's everyone's best guess from here on in, whether that's at a government level, an airline, a passenger, whoever it is. So we need to make sure that we're working on the process, not solving the problems, so that, you know, as those things change and flux, everyone can be kept informed, everyone can be looked after, whether that's the passenger or the airline or the, you know, the airport staff, whoever it is, everyone needs to be kept in the loop. We need to have mechanisms to do that. So I think we need to get rid of the idea of like a booking as being an absolute from now on. It's kind of within a range. So we need to be ready for that.
Thank you. And as I hand over the microphone to Hasse, and thank him for allowing me to moderate this session, can I ask you for your final words and let you take it from here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. And just, you know, echo what you've said and what Irene just said, that we're now dealing with something that is a current situation, and, you know, we deal with measures and regulation that is, you know, changing by the hour, and you know, everything is kind of a firefighting mode. Yeah, but we should keep the long-term goals. We should also have a plan for how, you know, we transform into, you know, where things are normalized. Whether that is, you know, that we keep certain behaviors, we should just be aware that we should not keep measures, you know, where it doesn't make any relevance anymore. We should have a plan for the future. But I know that we're all completely occupied with, you know, the stuff that is going on now, but it's really important to keep the long-term goals. The world will change, and we will take our learnings with us into this new, into the future. Yeah, and I think getting back to what really changed was, you know, maybe not as much how we handled disruption, but the way that disruption happened, and certainly when it comes to the unpredictable or the diverse regulation in this area. I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done, that we are doing actually as we speak, to align regulation and measures. But again, we shouldn't keep them for as longer as it's needed. We should have a plan for the future. So with no further ado, I would just thank you very much, the panel, for taking part in this discussion. And I think you brought some very valuable stuff on the table that we would definitely be able to use in developing the future, developing the future tools in disruption management. And yeah, so thank you very much for that. And I'm just going to leave the word to Andrew to sort of finalize the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hasse, and thank you very much to the panel. Steve, you did an outstanding job, superb. A round of applause for you from all the people who are online. Thank you very much. I just wanted to let everybody know we have some guidance available. Part of this is the ICAO Council's Aviation Recovery Task Force, CART, documentation. You can find that online. If you go to the iata.org website, you'll find links to everything from there. You will also see that we have a travel regulations map, which is available through Thematic. This is to try and help restart the industry. So there is actually a tool available which will help passengers see what the regulations are for where they're going, help you get some clarity on your pre-planning for your travel. Yeah. This tool, of course, is available to all of the airlines as well, so that they can have much more detailed information on the current regulations. As it's been mentioned a couple of times, those regulations are changing by the hour. And in fact, whilst we hoped that there would be lessons learned from the shutdown of aviation, in the restart it is, if anything, a little more chaotic than it was when the shutdown was happening. Aside from that, it is IATA's 75th year of existence. Rather a sad year, as it turns out, in terms of aviation. But you know, we're sticking in there. We're going to do our best to be with aviation, and a strong aviation, for the next 75 years. And of course, stay strong. We will all make it through. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end the webinar. That's going to cut everybody off rather quickly. So please let me say thank you very much and farewell.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.